Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's podcast. As you can see, we have a bit of a change in the background. We just decided this time around to make it a little bit more casual, so we're just basically going to sit in our living room. Today, we will be looking into the most recent Canadian true crime headlines. In particular, what has happened with Robert Pickton, that infamous monster, the pig farmer who murdered many, many women. Something has happened to him. Also, we're going to do a bit of an update about La Macaza prison. So it's almost been a year, if not a year by the time I'm recording this, that Paul Bernardo was moved to La Macaza prison, that he was moved to medium security. We've made some discoveries about that, and the fact that basically for possibly 5 or more of Canada's most notorious serial killers and whatnot are all in medium security now, all in the same medium security facility. And these inmates have been deemed dangerous offenders. So just the fact that they even have the opportunity to move into medium security facilities is sort of mind-blowing, and it just goes to show that the law is more on their side. Actually, it's more of human rights. There's a big worry that the government or Canada Corrections is going to harm any of these inmates, where they could possibly file a claim with Human Rights Commission. There's a whole thing about that. But anyway, with the current government and with the bill that was recently passed, these dangerous offenders are entitled to comfort and safety. So what is a dangerous offender anyway? So Canada's dangerous offender laws are rooted in the 1947 Habitual Offender Act and the 1948 Criminal Sexual Psychopath Act. So in 1977, they just decided it was easier and things were changed, and then these particular offenders were now deemed dangerous offenders. So I did a little research further and came across articles in the CBC website and Toronto Star. So in December 2023, there were 736 people in Canada classified as dangerous offenders. 580 of these dangerous offenders in Canada are held in medium security prisons. So 580 of the 736 are being held in medium security facilities. 57 of the 736 classified are living in minimum security facilities, which is basically the next step is out the door. Approximately 85% of dangerous offenders were sentenced for sexual crimes, and 41% of those involved children. Very sad and very disgusting. So today we're going to talk about a few of those dangerous offenders. If you're unaware about Robert Pickton, we're going to touch on a little bit of that case right now and just why we're actually talking about him. So he was charged with the murder of 26 women, so charged with the murder, but he was only convicted of 6. So I suppose the RCMP feels and the judge feels that convicting him of 6 was good enough because he would be put away for life. There were actually remains of 33 women found on that pig farm. So the families Victims' families are still trying to seek justice today. Now, one thing that I came across that is also a recent development in the Pickton case is that the RCMP is now trying to destroy the evidence that was found on that farm, which included a lot of the women's belongings, even, hair clips, and some of the hair clips still have hair in them. Anyway, these evidences are being stored in the RCMP warehouse, and they're saying it's taking up too much room and they want it destroyed. And in the meantime, there are still families trying to seek justice for their murdered family member, their daughter, their mother, their aunt, their best friend. Like, it's really ridiculous, and I don't think the RCMP should be able to destroy evidences in a case that is not 100% closed. There's something wrong there. There's just something really weird happening. On May 19th of this year, Robert Pickton, who is housed in maximum security, Port Cartier Institution in Quebec, was attacked by another inmate and was beaten to the point where he was clinging to life. You know what? Whatever. Surprised it hasn't happened before. He's an absolute monster. And I don't condone violence, but you know what? Here he is. I believe he is in his 70s now, and he's still alive, and these women are not. And what he did them was absolutely horrible. We were actually supposed to do a podcast about Robert Pickton, but even someone like us that really loves true crime and doesn't really get jolted by too much or shocked by too much, that case is really, really tough. The details are gory. It's very sad. Very, very sad. But anyway, you know what? This guy deserves it. So, whatever. And he is 74 years old. He, at the moment, is still in critical condition. He was put into an artificial coma. So it was announced maybe 2-3 days ago that they're going to try to remove him from life support to see if he can survive on his own. What had happened was another inmate attacked him with a broken broom handle and stabbed him in the head. So, you know what, at his frail age, and just considering that sort of injury, I don't know. And honestly, whatever. It would be nice if these other families could get their justice before he leaves this world. The reason that I'm bringing it up, though, is because we are also going to talk further about La Macaza prison. So just a little bit of a history about La Macaza itself. So in the 60s, La Macaza was a military base. In the 70s, it was deserted, and shortly after became Manitou, a school for Indigenous students. In 1977, Correctional Services Canada basically took over everything, and La Macaza Institution, medium security, was created. So I found some facts about medium security. I didn't know a lot about medium security until actually the move of Bernardo. So I got into a little bit just to learn more about medium. So La Macaza in particular, it's a standalone facility, and I will put a photo of it up. It's built on an open campus model. So it most likely has a lot to do with it being a military base and school previous. The capacity is 240 inmates. So inmates are allowed to roam around, and they're allowed to spend less time in their lockup. They also have access to programming and employment options within the prison. It has also been described as a relaxed environment. And look, don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about everyone that has been in prison. I know people can change. I feel like the people that I'm going to talk about today, maybe they claim they've changed. I don't know. There's a lot of deep-rooted evil there, and I don't understand how they can be fully rehabilitated. But there are success stories, sure. But La Macaza houses mostly sexual offenders and serious sexual offenses. Also, that would include homicide. So I don't know. To get to medium security, an offender needs to have a low, moderate escape risk and a moderate public safety risk, or require a moderate degree of supervision and control in the prison. Okay. Still, honestly, I don't think it applies to these people that I'm going to be talking about, but this is their intent at La Macaza. So in 2019, the Trudeau government passed Bill C-83, which said that Correctional Services Canada must house prisoners in the least restrictive environment. And this is according to their behavior, and it is a point system. So these inmates can actually earn points while they're in maximum security and further earn points while they're in medium security. Sort of like behavior points, and are they participating in their programs? What has changed? How have they changed? What steps have they taken? This I found really interesting. So Paul Bernardo apparently has qualified for medium security since 1999. It made me look a little bit more into what sort of what is the criteria? And how did he qualify for a medium security facility so early on in the game? I mean, it was still very fresh at the time. He might have been a low escape risk, sure. But to say that he was completely eligible to go to medium security right away seems very ridiculous. The reason that he wasn't sent to medium security was for his safety. So considering who he is, I mean, he's always been a target. And the time that he spent in maximum security, he spent basically 23 hours of the day in isolation. I think they attempted a number of times, probably when he was in Kingston Pen, to sort of integrate him a little bit into smaller groups of prisoners, but it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to happen. So apparently when he was moved to Millhaven facility, Paul Bernardo worked with the warden and program directors to come up with a sort of path of learning where he could earn his way into integration and also earn his way into medium security, which is exactly what happened. So, I think, wow, it's just awfully nice of the warden and correctional services and the program director to help him. I don't know. I believe in human rights, but I mean, come on. Violent sexual offenders are often transferred to La Macaza to begin more treatment as they near their eligibility for parole after spending about 20 years in maximum security. So previous videos I've done touching on the subject, especially the Bernardo move, have hinted toward sort of that 20 to 30 year mark, whether you were given a life sentence or not. They do every 2 years sort of meet with the inmates, the parole board, and sort of go over, what are you doing, and the programming, and the blah, blah, blah. But these dangerous offenders will eventually qualify for it. The Canadian justice system, and I mentioned it before, has his sights set on rehabilitating the inmates, and as many as possible and as much as possible, and even ones that are classified as dangerous offenders. That is the goal. They don't want to keep them incarcerated forever. They want to work with them to reintegrate them back into society. La Macaza itself specializes in providing treatment to sexual offenders, as I mentioned earlier. And almost 2/3 of the inmates held there have been convicted of a sexual offense. There's also anger management training, stress management training, social skill training, programming focusing on how to control, now get this, how to control or reduce the interest for sexual violence or sadistic behavior. So they're basically teaching them how to, like, it's all preventative training, how to deal with these feelings. So why would they even have programming like that? And what is Bernardo doing there amongst these others that are housed there? Like, what are they doing there? They are getting this programming and training to reintegrate them back into society somehow. Although rumor has it that Bernardo is basically still sort of in isolation. He does have a lot more freedom. He was a good boy in maximum security. That's how he ended up in medium security. It's crazy. La Macaza also have a relapse prevention program. It's a group of inmates that meet and they talk and they discuss and also learn from the program director about how to not commit crimes at all. I discovered some information, again back to Bernardo. It's just the easiest one to touch on right now, but more to come. He is officially attending programs to determine his eligibility for conditional release. So there's at least that. And this is official word. So he might be earning conditional release. Just nuts. Why? So there is also documentation regarding Bernardo and the Parole Board of Canada. And apparently he pledged to the Parole Board of Canada that if he is ever released, even a day release, that he would like to see his parents there, who are very elderly right now. And also in this document, he would like to move away from Ontario. So if this happens, if he gets conditional releases and then day parole, and if it just goes on from there, if he's allowed to move away from Ontario, come on. This is actually, it's a plan. And it's being worked on. And I just can't even say enough how ridiculous it is. Again, it's not even about the victims or the victim's family or the safety of the public. So he's not the only, as I mentioned, dangerous offender has been transferred to La Macaza. Again, under secrecy. Someone who was most recently transferred there, say 2 years ago, shortly before Bernardo actually, was Luca Magnotta. So you probably know about Luca Magnotta from the Netflix documentary, which is absolutely disturbing. And I can't even watch it. I've tried a number of times to watch it. It involves cats. Also, a jury found Magnotta guilty of first-degree murder in 2014 for the killing and dismemberment of international student Jun Lin in 2012. So, Not to go too much into the gory details, but Lynn's body parts were found in a suitcase outside Mignata's apartment. Also, he sent pieces of his body to headquarters of political parties, to Vancouver schools, and even a park in Montreal. So after an international manhunt, Mignata was arrested in Berlin in 2012 at an internet cafe. He was sentenced to life in prison at Port-Cartier Institute in Quebec. Mignata was given no chance of parole for 25 years. So here we go, between the 20 and 30 years again. He will be eligible for day parole in June of 2034 and full parole in June of 2037. So Mignata was fairly young when he was arrested. He is now 41 years old, I believe. I will find that. Yeah, and this is official. But just because he's eligible doesn't mean he's going to get it, but guess who is in La Macaza prison right now? Luca Mignata. So Luca Mignata, as much of a monster as he is now housed in La Macaza. He was moved in secrecy from the public. And the reason that the public found out about Luca Mignata actually being moved to La Macaza was a member of parliament was visiting La Macaza shortly after Bernardo's move, which was about a year ago. And he noticed somebody walking in the hallway, and he said to himself, that looks like Luca Mignata. And he was right. It was Luca Mignata. So apparently the victim's family was made aware that Luca Mignata was being moved from maximum security to medium security. But it sounds like a lot of people that should have known did not know. And as I said, the only reason that we found out is because this member of parliament was visiting La Macaza because of everything that was happening with Bernardo being moved there. So, okay, Luca Mignata is there and he's participating in these programs, which will lead to who knows what, his freedom possibly. So another inmate that has been moved to La Macaza, medium security from maximum security, is Russell Williams. And I just can't believe it. Now, there isn't a lot of information about his move. They've been really secretive about this one. There's sort of not much out there about it. So he is currently serving a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years for 2 murder convictions committed in November 2009 and January 2010 also. He was found guilty of sexual assaults, forcible confinement, and breaking and entering. So keep in mind, this is not that long ago. Possibly Russell Williams, like Bernardo, qualified fairly quickly for medium security, but again, he would have had a hard time integrating into the prison population, I can imagine, given his crimes. He was very highly respected, though. He was a former colonel in the Royal Canadian Air Force. You know, we've touched on the idea of doing a podcast about him, but seems like there's a lot already out there about him. But we still might, because that is a real weird one. Anyway, he is now housed in La Macaza, medium security, getting all those programs, getting an education. They're working with him to make him suitable for society. It's just really wild. Another one who was secretly transferred to La Macaza medium security was Michael Rafferty. Now, he was convicted of sexual assaulting. I'm trying to be not going to too much description. He murdered and sexually assaulted Tori Stafford. And and she was only 8 years old. That happened April 8th, 2009. So basically, he got his girlfriend to lure Tori into their vehicle. And this was in Woodstock, Ontario. They said they had a puppy, and would you like to see it? And, you know, of course, she's 8 years old. They brought it to a farmer's field, and things went horribly wrong from there. And she was beaten to death. Her body was found 3 months later. In 2018, Michael Rafferty was moved from maximum security to the open campus, medium security, La Macaza. Absolutely disgusting. And, you know, some of these are still very fresh. And I just don't feel like this is right. And how can this be law? It is because of that darn bill that was passed by our current government that allows this. There's so much deep-seated stuff. I just don't understand how these men can be really rehabilitated. Really doesn't make any sense to me. It's been quoted that most likely many more high-profile, dangerous offenders will be moved into medium security, or that have been moved into medium security that we will never know about. Because, again, in the end, it is about their rehabilitation back into society. What really gets to me is, you know, the victims of these. I mean, again, I call them monsters, but I mean, they just are. They're just not human. They're just not. They're so dark. You know, a lot of the victims would be my age. And to think about these people, not even people, the inmates at medium security, getting all these benefits and having their freedom, being alive. And their poor victims have not go on in life. That chance was taken away from them. You know, they didn't get to have a child. They didn't get to be a grandparent. They didn't get to, you know, have a career and, you know, see the world. Like, it's so disturbing. Not saying it's perfect in prison, you know what, I'm sure. I mean, it's prison, but still, they're reaping a lot of benefits, and these men do not deserve it. All this is absolute bullshit. But anyway. It's just not fair, and we're going to be watching this story as it is happening. It's really, really interesting. I'm going to get a little bit more into researching La Macaza because I'm curious to know who else is there. I mean, if these 4 and possibly 5 absolute monsters are there, I mean, and also why there? There are more medium security facilities in this country. How come they're putting them all together in the same one? Like, it's just, I don't know. It's just very, very unusual. It's just something absolutely, like, ass backwards about this, the correctional system. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me on this podcast. We will have another podcast coming up in about a week or so. And since it's summer, well, practically summer, a lot more exploring adventures coming up. So stay tuned. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.